Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Gerald's Game by Stephen King. Now, Gerald's Game was published in 1992. Now, before I read this book, I've heard a lot of mixed things about this book. Like, I've heard some people say this is one of King's best books, and then I've heard some people say this is one of his worst, and I've also heard some people say the book is just okay. Now, I have to say that I really enjoyed this book. I actually thought this was a really good book. Now, I can't say I would rank it among one of Stephen King's best, but I definitely think on its own, this is a really good book. Now, the plot of Gerald's Game is it's about this woman named Jessie, who in the beginning of the book is playing a sex game with her husband, Gerald. Now, she didn't really want to be a part of this game, but her husband kind of talked her into it, and the game involved her being handcuffed to the bed while he has sex with her, but she wants to end this game, but he gives no signs of actually wanting to end the game. In fact, he actually looks like he intends to rape her, so she kicks at him and ends up kicking him in the nuts. But the problem is, though, he also had a bad heart, so he has a heart attack and dies, and so she's left there handcuffed to the bed. So, the majority of this book actually takes place on this bed, and she's handcuffed to the bed, so she can't get to food or water, and also they're in a cabin in the middle of the woods, so she can't really cry out for help either, because nobody's going to hear her. Now, in the book, Jessie starts to hear these voices in her head. Now, you realize that she's kind of been hearing these voices all her life, but now that she's in this situation, the voices in her head start to take over, and it gets to a point where she really can't decipher reality from fantasy. Now, in the book, you realize that Jessie also has a lot of emotional problems, but a lot of this comes from the fact that she was actually molested as a child. Now, I really liked Gerald's Game. I thought this was a very good book, and it's actually a really disturbing book as well, because in the book, Jessie has these flashbacks to when she was a child and when she was molested, and my god, there's actually a scene in this book that takes place when she's a child, and it describes her getting molested, and it's one of the most disturbing things I've ever read in a book. Like, it was actually really hard to get through. And aside from being a very disturbing book, it's also a very psychological book as well, because the majority of the book really does take place inside Jessie's head, so you really do get inside the mind of this character. And it's also a really sad book as well. Like, it's sad what this woman has been through and what she's going through right now. Now, in the book, there does seem to be a lot of commentary on sexism and misogyny. Like, the book has a lot of commentary on how, unfortunately, there are a lot of men in our society who do like to kind of dominate over women, and in the book, you really do get the idea that this guy, Gerald, her husband, was a very sexist person. But once again, I really liked Gerald's Game. I thought it was a really good book. I thought it was a very disturbing and psychological story, as well as a very sad story as well. Now, I do have one problem with the book. In the book, there's this thing that Jessie keeps seeing in the book, and you're really not sure if it's real or not. Now, if you've read the book, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, and they kind of explain what this thing was at the end of the book, and I didn't really like that. I would have preferred it if this thing was just left ambiguous. Now, a lot of Stephen King's books actually take place in the same universe. Like, in this book, you actually get a lot of links to Stephen King's novel Dolores Claiborne. Like, in one of the flashbacks that take place when Jesse was a child, it turns out that Jesse had some kind of a psychic link with the character of Dolores Claiborne, who of course is the main character of the book Dolores Claiborne. Also in this book, the character of Alan Pangborn, who was one of the main characters in The Dark Half, and was also the main character of Needful Things, he actually is briefly mentioned in this book. Also, the town of Derry, which is the town that Stephen King's novel It took place in, is also mentioned in this book. So yeah, that's my review on Gerald's Game by Stephen King, and bye.